for coaches, get really clear about what impact you're already making with clients. I think that's been something I've tried to figure out recently too. And that impact doesn't, especially if you're in a career space, impact doesn't always have to be my client got a new job or they got this promotion. It might be a mindset shift. It might be somebody listening to themselves. But I think that if you want to scale in any capacity, you need to be very clear about how you have helped your current clients.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to 7 and 8 figures without burning out. Before Purple Circle, I started and scaled several 7 and 8 figure career coaching businesses myself and consulted with 2 career coaching businesses that are now doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or just building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Career Coaching Secrets podcast. I'm your host, Regin, and today's guest is Meredith Mira, the founder of Choice Points Career and Life Coaching. Meredith is an ICF-certified trauma-informed coach with a doctorate from Harvard and a passion for helping early to mid-career professionals and recent PhDs find clarity, confidence, and purpose. Her coaching is deeply empathetic, neurodivergent, affirming, and grounded in real-world strategy. It's a real pleasure to have you on the podcast today, Meredith. We were just talking earlier, so welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's really nice to be here. I'm really excited with the questions that I know we're going to walk through, so thanks for being so thoughtful in that.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to do this and to have you on the podcast. Meredith, tell me a little bit more about what inspired you to become a coach and start your coaching business.
This is a good question because in many respects, what inspired me to become a coach is rooted in even my upbringing and the experiences that I've had in childhood leading up through grad school and then into ultimately my choice to become a coach. I'll try to encapsulate that in a short version. I grew up as the daughter of 2 educators. My mom taught elementary school. My dad taught high school. My dad was a coach. My mom really enjoyed sports. There was a lot of coaching that happened in my life from an early age. A lot of question asking. My mom, I will really give her a lot of credit for the curiosity that I have about other people. My mom is such a question asker, and she does so out of a deep curiosity for understanding people and helping them feel seen and heard. And my dad's the same, but my mom is the one who would ask the questions. And the apple didn't fall far from the tree. She modeled what it was like to feel paid attention to and to have people be curious about you. And through her modeling of that, through my dad's own coaching, he was my coach at times. He was very present in the sports I was doing growing up and thinking about mental attitude around these things. I grew up thinking about how to be curious about myself and then ultimately be curious about others. So I think there's an embedded curiosity and coachingness in me. I don't know if coachingness is a word, but I'm going to make it a word. So I went to graduate school ultimately to study education and student identity development and like college student identity development. And a really big part of college student identity development is them making meaning of their own self, their own identity, how they operate and relate to others in the world. I went on to graduate school at Harvard, where I was really studying the sociology of education and started doing work with Marshall Gantz, who's a professor at the Kennedy School of Government. Marshall is at heart a community organizer. What it means to be a community organizer is that you are motivating others to take collective action to address some social issue. And a big part of the way you do that is through storytelling. Sharing your story, what you value, eliciting what other people value. And if you have some shared values, you can take collective action together. And I think the thing that drew me into working with Marshall, to studying community organizing, was my drive to elicit other people's stories. And this has been a through line all the way to starting to do career advising at Yale, where I was coaching and supporting students in that case around their careers. So I think the thing that ultimately led me to go off on my own practice in career coaching, it was really the coaching piece was honed for a long time in my life. The listening to people's stories, asking questions, being curious. The career piece came from Yale. I moved to the New Haven community. There was a position there. It seemed like a reasonable fit. So I honed my craft around career by working there. I had honed my craft around coaching, I think, much earlier. And ultimately, in answer to the question, after 10 years, I think I was ready to take my own ideas about what it means to support people in their careers and broaden it out a little bit. I learned a tremendous amount at Yale. I'm still in touch with my colleagues there. It was such a wonderful set of people to grow my career around. And then I wanted to sort of branch out and broaden out. And so it feels like coaching was just a natural extension of all of those pieces. And that's what brought me into coaching today.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I really like the part of there taking inspiration from others, especially even in your family. And I could tell the curiosity trait from your mom and like asking questions. That is a very good trait. How does like the journey? So it's been 2 years now, 2 years and a month. How does it look like from the point that you started it to where you are at now?
Yeah, that's a great question. In terms of my coaching practice, I have, let's see, what are the things that are exactly shifting? My primary work is still in one-on-one coaching. So I started doing one-on-one coaching, and that has been the bread and butter of what I have been doing. And so I do feel like in that sense, the showing up, being curious, helping ask questions that elicit people's values and the things they care about and how to align that with career, that feels really similar. The things that feel different, I did go through a coaching certification program. And when I went through that program, it really helped me to get clear about how I was moving people through a process. So I think I've gotten more structured in my thinking. It's still really nuanced and specific to that person's story and the goals that they have. But I think I've gotten better at making sure that I'm staying within certain boundaries, knowing that with coaching, if you sort of allow people to always move out of those boundaries, you go over time, you do things, sometimes it can get a little blobby and a little unclear where we're going. So I think I've gotten better at boxing in what we're working towards while still leaving some breathing room. I have just technically onboarded some systems that have helped me to streamline some of the operations of my practice. I will say that operationally, I'm fine. I can do things. I'm savvy enough to be able to work with a system, to know how it works. The actual process of onboarding that system, infusing it into my daily life, felt a little bumpy. I resisted that. And I think part of it is similar to how I've created more structure in my coaching. I don't know that I kind of live in the like, I want to just go with where people want to take me. And I realized that I just wanted to do things by hand and not, send people a contract that was through Word, do things in a very natural, tapped in way. And I realized that in doing that, I was limiting who I could work with. My processes were getting a little bit messy is maybe the wrong word, but occasionally I'd forget to send something or as I got more people into my practice. So I needed to streamline things, and that has definitely been a shift that has happened over the 2 years.
Nice. So basically more structure from compared to when you started it till today. I really like that that now it's gotten more structured and more streamlined. Is there a specific when it comes to the target audience, has that been focused in a specific group, like a specific niche? Has that been streamlined in a way too?
Yeah, so this is a good question. The target audience has eluded me a little bit. When I was working at Yale, I worked there for 10 years. I worked primarily with undergraduate students. Occasionally, I worked with graduate students and even postdocs. So there was a reasonably wide age range, but primarily I was working with people who were probably 18 to 23 or 24, and sometimes people who were a year or two out from Yale, so early career alumni. So when I started, that felt like more of my wheelhouse. And I was working with some Yale alums who continued to stay on with me after leaving, and that felt good. The thing that pretty quickly shifted, of course, is that when you are in undergraduate, though you're doing internships and things of that nature, you are still pre your career. You're still envisioning what could be. And of course, as you start working with people who are in the workforce, they are in the day-to-day space of their work lives. They are navigating challenges that arise when they are at work. They're trying to figure out whether and how they want to be at work. Does it align with their values? How do they manage different aspects of how they feel when they're at work? That was really different from what I was doing with undergrads who were not yet at work, and they were just envisioning what they hoped it would be. And so that was in some ways, I would call that a learning curve in the way that I was coaching people. What was I actually coaching them around? If they were early in their careers, maybe they were thinking about their next steps, but maybe they were just trying to figure out how to navigate where they were. And then I started getting people who were, let's say, late 20s, early 30s, had been in a career for a little bit and were starting to think, I need something different. And in fact, this thing wasn't ever aligned with me to begin with. So I started doing some coaching with that group. And then occasionally I had people who were senior manager, VP level saying, I think I'm actually about to make a major shift in my career. And I don't know how to narrate myself because I haven't done that in so many years. So all of a sudden, I moved from primarily early career to going anywhere from people who were 19 or 20 to people who occasionally were even in their like mid 50s. And on occasion, I would work with somebody who had been an academic for a while and decided they were going to move out of the academy and no longer be teaching and doing research. So the idea of who my target audience started to get really murky. It's like, what is the commonality here? I've come to recognize that my sweet spot in the space I feel the most fluid is people in their early career, probably people in their 20s. They're still in the early stages of figuring out who they are in the workforce. There's still so much space and room for them to envision what's next. Is graduate school involved? I support people applying to graduate school occasionally as well. But I think that the commonality across people, whether they're in their early career or mid-career, is that they are reflective people who have really taken steps back in their lives to think about themselves and starting to dive into who they are and how who they are interacts with their workplace or doesn't. So I think the people that tend to come to me and I to them are people who they think a lot. They are definitely people who are reflective. They're probably in therapy. In some ways, I love working with people who are already in other therapeutic containers because it means that they are pretty deeply discerning who they are and what feels good to them. We're often, I wouldn't say that I'm a career coach who I do work with people who are like, I need to just get a job within the next month. I need a resume review and a cover letter and all these things. I can do that. I think the people I'm working with are really trying to better understand their own career narrative. They're trying to discern like what's felt good, what hasn't felt good, where they're going next. They feel a little lost and confused about self and how they want to be in the workplace. So I think the people that I work with are people who want to envision something different. And it's not necessarily like a quick turnout. I'm usually working with people not for months on end, but it's usually a little bit more long term than let's meet for 30-minute sessions and you'll go apply for jobs. That was a really long answer.
Yeah, well, it did explain how it has changed. I really like that. Do you feel like, or at least let's just talk about the early ones, the ones in early in their careers, is there a specific industry or is not divided by industry?
I would say that the industry has, early on when I was working with alums that I knew from Yale or people that they had referred to me, there was an angle and a bent towards consulting or some of the, larger tech companies. At this point, I would say it's really diffuse. I've started working with people who are doing work in various like consumer products industries or people who work in data around data collection for television ads. Like, I mean, it's just become quite a broad space, inclusive of people who work in the nonprofit space and are trying to figure out if that's the direction they want to go, or et cetera, et cetera. So I would say there is not a particular industry that I tend to coach around. It's very broad.
Thank you for sharing that. And where do you find them? Where do you find your clients? So, like, what marketing channel works best for you right now?
So it's interesting. I was just talking to a fellow coach and consultant yesterday. She started her practice about a year ago. And she and I were both speaking about where our, people were coming into our coaching space. And for both of us, it has primarily been referral based. I recognize that a benefit to being a relationship builder is that over time, I've built some really strong relationships and I've been in spaces where I've developed trust with people. And so as I did, put myself out there through LinkedIn or on Instagram or even on Facebook, just with friends and that sort of community, I think that people put a pin in that, like, oh, that's cool. Meredith has started doing her own coaching practice. And so I've gotten a number of referrals from people in many different pockets of my life. And so that has been the primary thing. And then sometimes it's literally those clients who are then referring me to other people beyond that. So that's been a number of things. I did become a part of a few Facebook groups that were women in business, broadly defined. Coaching school that I went through, which is IGC Coaching School, was excellent for this. They have not only training around how to become a really strong coach, they also provide training around how to build a business because they recognize that that was really missing in the coaching industry. And so when I graduated from IGC Coaching School, they were like, these are a couple of groups that are pretty active on Facebook in terms of getting referrals. And a lot of my coaching peers from the program would see a post that said, I'm looking for somebody to do career coaching. And they would jump in and say, Meredith Mira, go talk to Meredith. And so I had a couple of people come from that. And interestingly, one or two others that I met with probably almost a year later, I would say, how did you actually get my name? And they said, oh, I'm a part of that group. And I went and searched career coaching and a couple of requests popped up and I saw your name. And so I reached out. So that has definitely been outside of my referral base, but now they are referring me to people. I would say those are the primary ones. I am on TikTok. That was actually the first social media platform that I started producing on because I really wanted to do more live, just speaking to the camera. I think that I get too many people from TikTok. It's not a space for those of you who are on there. It doesn't tend to be a space where people are looking for services to purchase. But at the same time, I think that it broadened out the range of people that I was reaching. It gave me a test case for what things seem to resonate. I've used that content in other places. And occasionally someone will say, I actually saw your material on TikTok. Mostly word of mouth, mostly referral, and loosely these social media channels.
Thank you. And when you look at the future, is there any goals that you're working towards with your coaching business? Maybe you just shared like different marketing channels that you're utilizing, and referrals is a big part of that. Maybe the goal could be, I don't know, going in a different marketing channel, or I don't know.
Yeah.
You
No,
cover that.
So I probably about a year ago, there was a retreat that I was at, again, through the coaching program that I went through. And I remember talking to Liv, who's the CEO of that program, and she said, "Do you want to scale?" And I was like, I don't even know what it means exactly to scale. And she said, "You can also remain a one-on-one coach. Like there's just nothing wrong with that. It's harder to scale in that kind of way, but there's nothing there's nothing wrong with that." And I think from that moment, I've just been thinking, what am I doing? What does it mean for me to scale? What is scalable about what I do? I mean, in many respects, at heart, I'm a researcher. I'm an academic. I was trained in how to really study people and understand their stories and pull out themes. And that has, that has infused itself in me. If you ever work with me as a coach, you know that you get notes after all of our sessions with themes and core ideas and things that seem to be connecting. I want people to feel like their stories are being reflected back to them. That's really important to me. People don't get that. They don't get people. There's not many opportunities that we have to be deeply listened to and for people to be just utterly curious about us and in a really sincere way, and for them to ask questions and to make connections. It's just not something that we often experience. And I love doing it. It's such a part of me. And to try to scale that experience is really difficult. So, what have I been thinking about? I did do a prototype with a few friends and acquaintances of a group coaching cohort a couple of months ago. And I am in the midst of launching my first group coaching cohort called Discerning Change. It is about envisioning your future steps. It's usually for people who maybe they're in between things, but they're people who might be in a job, they've been in it for a long time, and they're thinking like, I think there's another iteration in here, but I don't know quite what's next. And the idea is to come together and to envision possibilities within a group. So that is the next step that I'm thinking about. Right now, the group is slated to be 4 months. I'm starting to see that that might be a tricky amount of space for a group. So I am contemplating breaking it down into smaller 1 month, maybe meeting once a week. I don't even know. It'd be half group coaching, half uh, guided workshop, something that's theme based, some ideas, almost a mini course, perhaps. So I am starting to think about how I can bring people together with one another and how I can make that useful. I don't necessarily, there are, I understand there's classes where I could just teach and, no one would participate. But I'd really like to create spaces where people are building some relationships with one another. So that's part of where I'm going. I think the one-on-one work will always be the core of what I do. I'm trying to figure out this next step of how to grow something that still feels nuanced and in depth to the way that I want it to be.
And when it comes to investments, so far with your coaching business, in the last 2 years, for example, has there been any coaching programs, masterminds, or communities that you found to be helpful in growing your coaching business, or maybe kind of help you in getting started or moving to the next stage of your coaching business? Or like even you mentioned having a more structured approach, having more systems in place, even when looking at your target audience, how that has changed. Has there been any help with that?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say that I would not be anywhere close to having the structure that I had. Number one, if I hadn't gone through IGC coaching school. In many respects, I thought I know how to coach, and my coaching hasn't changed so dramatically. I really needed IGC in order to provide a little more structure, but more than that, they really did do a lot of provision of how to start to build my business. I also was an admissions advisor for a period of time for IGC. So I got some really in-depth sales training and learned what it means to take somebody through a sales call. In a sales course that I took, recognized that my initial I'm going to put in quote sales calls were just coaching calls. I was just coaching. I was giving free coaching in the first, 30-minute, what were supposed to be 30-minute exploratory calls were, 45 minutes to an hour long. And I was just barely figuring out what it is that people needed and how I could work with them. So I would say that was one of the biggest investments, not only just going through a coaching certification program, but one that provided business training, and specifically doing a sales course, which was provided through my coaching school, was deeply invaluable. I wouldn't have actually had a sales process in place for myself. After that, I would say there's probably three other things I've invested in. One, I did a really excellent trauma-informed coaching training with my peer, Sam Sinnett. Sam Sinnett is a business coach. She's excellent. She is also a therapist. She worked with individuals who were suffering from PTSD, and she's really an expert in trauma-informed care. And doing trauma-informed work has been huge for my practice. It's really important. I work with people who have, self or medically identified neurodivergencies who don't necessarily feel very comfortable and safe in other spaces. And I'm really pleased to say that the space I create helps people feel like they can take the mask off that they're usually wearing everywhere else. And I say that because that's what people have described to me when I'm like, what is it that I'm doing here? And they're like, I am not actually messy here. And we talk through kind of why that is. But the training that I got from Sam Sinnett was amazing. And being really centrally thinking about what it means to build a strong and safe holding environment for people who have even had any kinds of trauma in their past has been really important to me. I have gotten excellent operational coaching support from my colleague, Sandy Patterson. Sandy was a teacher for 14 years, and now she also does business coaching. And she's so organized and understands the process of how to use systems to your advantage and how to speak to your audience. And so I worked with her to help me onboard some systems. So that's the third piece, which is that I do use in my case, Honeybook client management system, which has been really, really helpful in streamlining scheduling and contracting. I was just doing everything by hand and separately. And Sandy and one of my other, really, I would say, board of directors, Elizabeth Amato, both of them said, Meredith, you cannot keep doing this by hand. Like, you have got to onboard some systems. It will streamline things for you. And so Sandy helped me to get that up and running. She helped me get Flowdesk up and running, which I've started doing some email newsletters, which is probably another piece that I'm starting to grow. And actually recognizing that systems can be useful if you use them and that you know how to use them. I think early on, I remember Sandy saying this to me. I do have a website as well. And I did set that up early on, but I remember Sandy saying, you don't need a website. You don't need a website. You can have a link tree. You can have these things that people spend so much time investing very early on in all of these different systems and setting them up, but they don't have a single client yet. And it's backwards. Like, you just don't need to be doing that. And she was really instrumental in me pacing myself of when to onboard things. And actually, Sam Sinnett was the same way. She's like, I wouldn't onboard things until it's like you finally push up against a wall where you realize you're dropping balls and you're like, now's the time. I need to set something up. It's too much now. And then you onboard a system.
You just mentioned you invested in this coach, and what I'm trying to figure out is, for everyone who's watching, what would be like an expected amount that they would pay a coach, kind of?
So I would say that the range that I have personally experienced and have thought about for myself, it would probably be anywhere between 200 and 350 for, let's say, an hour or maybe 90 minutes, depending. Obviously, some of the things I've invested in when I took Sam Sinnett's trauma-informed training, it was 2 half days, and I can't actually recall what the cost around that was. But I think, when you start to think about courses, I could imagine it being maybe a course might be, $1,000 or $1,200, maybe more or less, give or take. But that feels like especially for people who have the level of experience that I'm looking for. Yeah, probably between 200 and 325 seems like, I mean, 325 might be on the higher end, but maybe in the 200 seems like a pretty reasonable going rate.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think it's been a lovely episode. One other thing I wanted to ask you, and what is the biggest challenge you're currently facing in scaling your coaching business? Like, what is that one big thing that's preventing you from getting to where you want to be with your coaching
Yeah.
business?
The one big thing is the amount of nuance that I want to maintain with each of my clients. That is really hard for me to scale. And it's hard for me to envision I can't make more of me. And so I'm probably pretty close to saturation point in terms of my one-on-one clients. And it's a matter of, can I scale me and what I want to hold true for my clients in a group space and that I would feel good about? I think the other piece that I will say that is kind of potentially specific to, I guess I mostly coach people who are thinking about changing careers. I guess maybe that's something I could go back to the very beginning and say, I'm working with people who want to change careers. I'm not an executive coach. I'm not primarily working with people who are in their career who want coaching around how to navigate that, although sometimes it ends up being that way. When you're working with people who want to change careers, it tends to be shorter duration in terms of coaching clients. So I might be working with somebody who's like, actually, could we just do 4 sessions? And then maybe they come back to me later because they got some help and then they need some more help. But I do a lot of exploratory calls. So if I was working with clients for 6 months to a year, then I wouldn't have to be doing as much of the exploratory calls. And I'm like kind of constantly in onboarding new client mode. And there's never a point where I'm like, okay, I've got this. And now I'm not accepting any clients for the next 6 months. I'm like always accepting new clients and kind of always filtering them in because they're short enough in duration. So I would say that's part of it. That is a challenge.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing it. And for the last question, is there any final advice you'd like to give to other coaches who are trying to scale their impact?
Gosh, that's such a good question. I feel like I'm so in the midst of trying to figure out how to scale my impact that the thing that I would say is for coaches, get really clear about what impact you're already making with clients. I think that's been something I've tried to figure out recently too. And that impact doesn't, especially if you're in a career space, impact doesn't always have to be my client got a new job or they got this promotion. It might be a mindset shift. It might be somebody listening to themselves. But I think that if you want to scale in any capacity, you need to be very clear about how you have helped your current clients. I think it would be very difficult from my perspective to start in a group setting. The thing that I've gained from starting and having so many one-on-one clients is that I have tons of case studies about who I'm helping, how I'm helping them, the feedback they've given me about how I coach. I've figured out very strongly who I am and how I operate. And knowing that, and also the problems that they're facing. I mean, if you don't know what their problems are, if you don't have a lot of data points to figure out what are the primary problems that my ideal client is facing and how have I helped a bunch of different people, I think it becomes harder to scale. You need to know those things about yourself before you can actually grow. And you need some key learnings in order to then scale.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for all the advice you have shared in this podcast. Everyone wants to find you or connect with you. They can find you on your LinkedIn at Meredith Mira, and they can also find you on your website.
www.choicepointscoaching.com.
Okay, we'll make sure to link that also to our description. Thank you so much, Meredith. It was lovely having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, it was really nice to be here. Thanks for the good questions.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe to YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This conversation was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to 7 and 8 figures without burning out. To learn more about Purple Circle, our community, and how we can help you grow your business, visit joinpurplecircle.com.